Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from Capital One Bank and Chase Commercial Term Lending, the Witkoff Group, New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Greenberg Traurig, Perfect Building Maintenance, Genova Burns. Additional funding is provided by grants from AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Aerial Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Colliers International NYC, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, Customers Bank, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Foley & Lardner, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investment Developers, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, James Orphanides, Chairman, USRealty.com, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Massey-Knakal Realty Services, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, N.A., Meridian Capital Group, Newmark Grubb Knight Frank, Newbanks, MHP Real Estate Services, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Sterling Risk, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, the Continuum Company, the CUNY TV Foundation, the Moynihan Group, and these friends.
Food is made in New York City? Can you believe food is really made here? So today, with the help of my executive producer, Keith, I've brought together people who manufacture food and other items over here, but they're going to talk about how difficult it is finding new space when you're growing and where you go and what are the opportunities. So my guest today, as I said, is my executive producer of the session, Keith Cohn, who is the principal of Owasis Bakery, the oldest bakery in New York, Alexis Meason, who is the co-founder and principal of Blue Marble Ice Cream, and last but not least, the caterer to the stars, my good friend who's been on the show numerous times, Paul Newman, who is the chief creative officer of Newman's Kitchen. Can't believe this, truly. Ice cream is made in New York City or in Brooklyn. Yeah. We have bread, not bread. The best baguette, one of the best breads around. And then we have a wonderful caterer who uses everything and also manufactures. But here's what happens. They have to grow. Keith's in a little building on 78th Street. He's there for a couple of years. He takes over the business in 2007, wants to grow. So where does he go? What is he going to find? What are the opportunities? Then we have Alexis over here who started in 2007 with a dream with her partner of this ice cream business. So they went to Cobble Hill over there originally. Now they're in Industry City. And then there's Paul, who's been in the catering business numerous years and has been in the food business for close to 35 years. So Paul's in the situation that right now his place is on Christie Street. And Christie Street, there's not a need for a caterer. There's a need for a condo at that space. So where do you go? Mr. Newman, you're in the midst of trying to find a location. Tell me about the situation.
Well, you know, we started looking in Manhattan about 3 years ago, recognizing that Christie Street was eventually going to be developed, and we wanted to relocate. We wanted to be proactive about it, so we started looking around Manhattan. Spent a year and a half really shooting blanks, finding space. It was too expensive. We couldn't get access. We finally started looking in Brooklyn and Queens, and we have now zeroed in on a 18,000 square foot production kitchen commissary with offices that we're trying to sign a lease on. So we think we found the right space, but it's been a long...
But that's in Long Island City.
Correct. So we considered New Jersey, the Bronx, Long Island City, and Brooklyn. And we really concentrated. The key criteria for us is access for our people to get to work, which meant walking distance to a train, and then how many bridges and tunnels would we be near, and how long would it take us to get our 8 trucks in and out of the city.
But didn't you tell me that the Garden State of New Jersey
Offered us, New Jersey was so nice and was so happy to see us relocate there. And we went out there with best intentions, and they made an offer in excess of $10 million in benefits for us to move to New Jersey. When we looked at it and we said, well, what would a move to New Jersey mean, and what would a move to Brooklyn or Queens or the Bronx mean? The key criteria wasn't even the benefits. It was really, how do we get our product in and out, and what happens in traffic? What happens? The fact that we would be confined really to 2 choke points, Lincoln Tunnel, Holland Tunnel from New Jersey, but we have 5 points of access from Brooklyn or Queens, was the key determining factor for us.
The other factor has to be, you're in Manhattan right now, and your employees. The relocation of your employees to New Jersey. Sometimes Jersey City is fine, but not. It's good for regular businesses because they're offices. What you need is a production facility. You need a place where you can have trucks. And you don't always have.
I think New Jersey would actually be viable as a second commissary to build a business with a different geographic focus. But as long as our focus was really on getting in and out of Manhattan, it really wasn't. It was going to be very, very difficult. I think Jersey has tremendous potential to serve Jersey. I think there's a tremendous opportunity out there. It's just not what we need right now when our primary focus is how difficult is it to get product into Manhattan on an extremely constrained time frame. I mean, we have to be where we have to be within about a 15 to 30 minute window, and our first trucks leave at 5 in the morning, and the last trucks leave at 4 in the afternoon. So our trucks are making 2 or 3 trips a day.
And you're also making the trips during major traffic.
Major traffic.
So, Alexis, you started in 2007 in a small little shop. You were one of the pioneers to Industry City. And Industry City, nobody was going there. You lived in Brooklyn at that time.
Right.
It wasn't a neighborhood that people were really looking at. How do you make that pioneer decision to go to the Sunset Park neighborhood of Brooklyn?
Yeah, well,
people from Cleveland didn't know what Sunset Park was.
No, they certainly didn't, and probably still don't. Well, as you said, we got started back in 2007 with a single retail shop, and we thought, going into this, that might be the extent of what Blue Marble would be. We didn't have any big aspirations. But pretty quickly we saw how people were responding to the product, and we thought to ourselves, wow, we've got a serious business on our hands, and we've got to kind of grow to kind of keep up with this demand. So from a little corner of my business partner's apartment, we moved to a bigger space actually in Boerum Hill, and even that space, which is probably 1,200 square feet or so, even that space we outgrew quite quickly. So we were kind of shopping around, like you were talking about, and a friend came to us who's actually a sculptor. He does these massive installations. And
you realize that the gentleman that you're sitting next to is also a sculptor.
I did not realize that. Well, I have more to talk about then, I guess. And he had this giant space in a place called Industry City, which we had never heard of. He said, I don't know if they do food stuff there, but they've got a ton of space, and I think they're trying to kind of reinvent themselves. You should come check it out. There's a bunch of artists. It's got a very cool vibe to it. It's kind of out there a little bit to give you enough space.
But you were already in Brooklyn. See,
yeah.
Something was good. Because,
born and raised in Brooklyn. The brand was.
The brand was,
yeah.
Okay, and certified organic also.
That's right.
But you were in Brooklyn already, so it was easier for the move, okay? If you were in a shop in Manhattan going to a neighborhood like Industry City, which was truly industry and it didn't have anything, they were looking for tenants, I don't know how the feeling would have taken.
That's true, and Brooklyn was kind of in our DNA as a brand. We got started just a few minutes before Brooklyn started taking off as this kind of foodie mecca. And so as that happened, Brooklyn became more and more entwined with kind of our identity and our the product itself. So for us to kind of move outside of Brooklyn perhaps might have been in conflict with that.
Now, what you said prior to the show, which people, when you're growing, which is great to see the business growing by leaps and bounds, you don't have enough room, and the cost of production in Brooklyn, that's why you're using a co-packer today. I mean, the amount of space that you would need to produce the volume that you're selling at the supermarkets, you're selling other places, restaurants and so on, you can't do it in Brooklyn or even in Long Island City because of the size of the space.
That's absolutely right. It's not just the size of the space. If you get all this equipment, it's the labor costs, it's the utility costs, it's all of these things that are all more expensive in New York City than they are elsewhere.
But that's also part of the difficulties of food production in New York. Now, you went into business, you took over Oasis,
yes.
In this little space in 2007, before they were known for their best baguettes in the country over there. But you knew that for you to grow from a bakery, you had to go somewhere else. How did you decide on the Bronx?
Well, the Bronx, I mean, in terms of displacement of my employees, which was really one of the biggest concerns that I had. I didn't want to displace any of my employees. So where can I find and where were my employees situated and, where could we find a place that I can grow the business, afford to grow the business, right? Certain times people expand and they go right out of business. So there were a lot of different factors. And the Hunts Point section of the Bronx really worked out well. Currently, we're about 4 blocks away from a Subway, and that was paramount. And, other people had said, mostly brokers, well, it's 8 blocks or 10 blocks. And I said, that's great in June, but how about at 10 p.m. in February? So, I picked a space in the Bronx. It's good for us in terms of getting our deliveries out to the city. And also for our distributors that also distribute outside the city. So we have distribution in Connecticut and Westchester and Long Island.
Now,
so
but recently, you're also now opening up a shop.
I am.
Okay, so you had a similar situation in a different manner. And you've also, if you open up additional stores, how difficult is it to find space? We're looking in Brooklyn, as we know. And you finally, right now, are signing a lease on the west side.
Yes. Well, just like the Bronx location, for me to find the warehouse in the Bronx, it was probably close to a year and a half. And I would say to find our latest retail bakery cafe was at least a good solid year to find that right space. And when you're manufacturing, in this case, I'm going to be doing at the new space, the bread. We're going to be baking in front of everyone. There are certain things that have to be taken into account. What's the shape? I have to put an oven. I have to do production there as well and not only just have a cafe. So all those little details really matter at the end of the day because as a small producer, I don't have unlimited funds.
Here's a question that, we said before for Alexis, when she went to Industry City, the landlord, they needed you. They begged you. They gave you opportunities. They gave you free rent. They gave you a good location.
No $10 million.
Okay?
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Don't worry, I'm not getting it.
Paul, looking today, went to Industry City as an opportunity, and it's much more expensive. So that's another situation. Keith has been looking for a new store, and landlords are saying that the rents are up, and and as you said before on that. So when you're in the production of food or distribution of food, because you're in the food production, in addition to all this, there's the other problem of financing the cost of this. It's nice to say I'm going to relocate or I'm going to look over there, but, over the year when I originally met you and you were looking, it was very difficult for you to get a line of credit from an institution. You went to the SBA originally.
A couple of times. How do you grow financially in the initial stages? I'm not talking about the last couple of years.
A lot of self-sacrifice, which I'm sure you guys are familiar with. I'm a little bit earlier in the game than you guys are, but there's a lot of just kind of putting your needs last and, funneling every single penny you can back into the business. We were able to get some early round friends and family investors who kind of gave us the initial bump we needed to get to the next level. And then as we kind of picked up momentum and got more kind of higher profile wholesale clients and just kind of built our capacity as a whole, some investors kind of took note of that and were interested in kind of coming on board.
What about the traditional banks? I'm trying to look at it this way. You're in a difficult business, all three of you, different phases of it. How receptive were the financial institutions saying, oh, you may have been the oldest bakery. The bread may be good, but Keith Cohn, you've been in too many businesses. I mean, and you weren't even in this business. I mean,
right.
the two people who made on Craigslist, this is a different case.
Absolutely. We did try to go the traditional route, and most banks, I don't know, we talked to 3 or 4 of them, they all said no. So ultimately, we ended up with SBA loan and are now actually trying to expand that. So that's a good thing. They kind of took a risk with us, but it's not easy. I mean, they really put you through the ringer to get that money. And it's this kind of perverse logic where the bigger companies who probably don't need the money as much or have an easier time getting it, the money just kind of flows to them. But the little guys who are really struggling to grow, who need that capital, it's really hard to get.
This round for us will be about 50 or 60% self-funded, which the next word is sacrifice. And then I'm going to go to my bank, with whom I have a great relationship, and also an equipment leasing company. So about half the money should come from equipment leasing and bank, strictly banking relationship. And the other is
leasing is a hidden expense because it's more expensive than traditional bank financing. But it's a means to an end because you want to get the production.
It is, but it's, the rates are so low right now that I'm going to be leasing some equipment.
Well, when we say lease, I'm buying it. It's just
right. The way it's from an accounting
not really
perspective,
leasing. Exactly. You buy it for $1 at the end. So it sounds like a lease, but it's really just a way of financing.
But you avoid having to deal with a bank,
right?
And you have to explain what the oven is or the mixer, and they use as collateral. These companies know exactly, and they also know what. Right. In terms of if they had to repossess, God forbid, or anything else, what the auction rates, and they are able to do those numbers quickly.
When I do shows with the restaurant people and I discuss banks, the terminology is never. Very few of them have ever received bank financing because of the difficulties of the success rate. The bank financing for restaurants is the same bank financing for the theater, non-existent.
Well, the only thing I would add there is personal guarantee.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is this is both the cure and the disease. So God forbid anything happens, we're way more on the hook than we'd like to be for. But it's also a way that we can continue and grow our businesses. This move to Long Island City for us is, in theory, the best thing that's happened to our business. We've been on Christie Street for 19 years. This is going to give us a chance to double or possibly even triple our revenues over the next period of time. We could not sign less than a 15-year lease, a 10 and a 5, because the amount of money going into the space is so great that there's no way I want to try to amortize this over 10 years. Right. So it's the financing piece is interesting. I think we have all the pieces in place.
Because you're established.
We've been around for 34 years, but I'm personally signing for it. So this
is... and so are you signing for personally?
Everything.
And so am I, yeah.
Right.
You're going to have a location on the east side and the west side. You have how many stores now?
We have 2 brick and mortars, and then we have several seasonal outposts at Governor's Island and all the Brooklyn Flea kind of locations, Summer Stage at Central Park, et cetera, et cetera.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Now, are you going to try to have some more brick and mortar? Because, you see, I remember, since I'm a little older than you, that I remember when there was something called Baskin & Robbins, and they opened up all these brick and mortar, and then no more bricks and mortar for Baskin & Robbins. And then I remember there was, who was Cold Stone
Creamery.
Okay, you don't see them.
No.
Brick and mortar for certain businesses really doesn't exist in New York City anymore because it's too expensive, prohibitive over there.
I mean, I'm one of the last bakeries out there, right? I mean, you have it, you have new people coming in. They're opening quasi-bakeries here in the city, but they're foreign, okay? They're from France and some from
but where are they
Sweden.
making their bread? Where are they making their pastries?
They're doing it on premise, some of them. One in particular, probably the largest, also has some commissary area. But from what I understand, the funding behind that is much greater than what I carry around in my wallet.
Food production is difficult. And I remember a number of years ago, I had Danny Meyer on my show. And he was very upset. He came in a little late, and he was upset, and he had to wait until after the show to find out because they were inspecting his property. They were inspecting the restaurant. And, it's like that ABC on the... when you look at the restaurant, that has an effect. The Violations Bureau and all the rest. How do you, and you're certified organic and kosher. I mean, how do you survive?
Lots of scrutiny there. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too political, but with the health department, my complaint has been that there's no manual you can refer to. There's no, body of work that says
You mean
these are the rules.
You don't say this is how we make the baguette?
Well, in terms of
You have to wear a glove if
Yeah,
you're going to
wear
do
gloves.
Yeah, we know that.
I
at
know,
least.
but
Right.
So it seems very arbitrary. And one inspector can come in one day and fine you for X, Y, or Z. The next guy can come in and find totally different things, but not cite you for the first three. So sometimes it feels like they're not actually in the business of trying to help businesses be compliant and serve as a service, to the community or to the consumers. It's more just about making money, finding those violations and getting those checks.
It's like the meter maids.
Exactly.
I want to get in that
But
business.
a little more complicated, exactly. So I wish there was a little more collaboration between the Department of Health and Sanitation and food businesses, so we could work together so we understand exactly what the requirements are. We all want to be compliant. No one wants a C for any reason on that window, and certainly it doesn't help. But there's not a lot of communication.
If you have the C, that's the kiss of death. I mean, food pending grade, there are other situations that...
I'll tell you what I find fascinating, because I'm right at the cusp of signing a lease and doing all the work. It isn't even the health department or even the inspections or even the way we have to build the kitchen. The amount of filing and expediting and paperwork that goes into doing a project is mind-boggling. I've had meetings, I've had these construction meetings, and the expediter is talking to the architect and the kitchen designer and asking for these reports and that report, and my head is spinning, and the meter's running
And
on all of them.
right.
I mean, the expediter's fees for my project in Long Island City is probably in the $30,000 to $40,000 range.
Just for the
expediter, just to move the paperwork through the system. And I'm not arguing. This is a great expediter. Could I get it for less? I don't really care. I mean, what I care about is you talk about opening on March 1st. I want to open on March 1st. You say, why can't you open January 1st? The answer is I put a date on when I want it to open, and everyone's looking at me like I'm crazy.
Like you've never done this before.
And then I said, all right, so give me the critical path to this. And we're not even starting construction till September, October, and this goes back to May 1st when we were having these discussions. And so what's all that upfront time? Oh, that's paperwork and filing. And I'm like, really? 2 months it takes for the building department to get back to you as to whether the plans are acceptable before they even review the plans? I mean, some of the timelines are phenomenally long. So I don't feel like we're over-regulated. I agree with you 100% that it does seem arbitrary that they come in. My feeling about health department inspections is they get an impression when they first walk in, and you're either moving up or you're moving down. And if they feel like you're generally in compliance, they're gonna help you. But if they feel like they walk in and they see chaos, they are saying these people don't understand the rules, and we're gonna teach you about the rules by punishing you.
So here's a question: how hard is it to be in the food production business in New York City?
Hard in what sense? Look, let me tell you
operating.
what we have access to.
What are the main difficulties?
We have access to tremendous talent. We have access to unbelievable food sources, right?
Right.
We pay a tremendous amount of rent. We pay for the talent. And we have access to an enormous market. The thing about us is
the market.
We don't know
is
what
the
this is like to
capability.
be in Peoria, right? But we know what it's like to be in New York. So the challenges are expenses and regulation. The opportunities, my opinion, outweigh that because we've got talent, marketplace, and materials that you can't.
And people come to New York to live, to work, to shop, to dine in New York City.
Right.
New York City is one could say the food capital of the world.
Yeah.
Besides the restaurants, it's people want the food. They want the bread. They want the ice cream. They want the
The other
product.
thing we have is competition. And I have to say that if we don't think competition makes us better, if you don't go out and taste someone else's ice cream and go, I love that flavor, we need to counterpunch on that. We need that. If you don't go looking for breads, I mean, the competition keeps us sharp.
But you know what? You bring up another thing. It's the competition keeps you sharp, but you also have to increase your type of businesses in your product line.
Right.
Okay? Bread is one thing, then there are other baked products. Ice cream is one thing, but then, as you said to me before the show, you have ice cream in logs. You have ice cream in different packaging. So the ice cream could be put into a cookie that he might be selling over there, or into an ice cream product that Paul is utilizing in his catering. So you have to also be agile, that you can't live. And part of the reason that many of the bakeries and many of the food businesses went out of business in New York is that they didn't adapt. They didn't. They kept that single product business, okay? You know, I remember Ebinger's. I remember Entenmann's. I remember these places, you know, and they didn't adapt.
TAP, Michael, TAP, right? Tenacity, adaptability, perseverance.
Right, and that's part of what you have to do.
I mean, I was told a story about Ebinger's, which predates Entenmann's. And they had moved their facility, and since I'm in the baking industry, they moved from, I guess, Brooklyn City out to Long Island, and supposedly the water was different, and they weren't able to adapt their new recipes. And Entenmann's took their business over.
You're the oldest bakery,
Bread baker.
bread bakery in New York. Why?
Yes.
Because the rest are gone.
Right, the rest are gone.
Right?
That's right.
My father, when he got back from the war, there were 50 fish markets within 30 blocks on the Upper East Side. Then there were 30. Then there were 20. Then there were 10. Then there were 5. Eventually, he got to be big because he was the only one. He was the last one standing. He and Leonard.
Survival of the fittest. That's it.
Right.
But I'm very happy that we've brought together the finest today in food production. The finest bread, the finest ice cream, and the finest caterer. And I'd like to thank Keith, Alexis, and Paul, and I'll see you next week.
Thank
and
you.
we're eating the bread, don't worry.